The wind on the Montana plains was a cruel sculptor, carving away at the land and the souls of those who lived on it. For 6 years, it had been a constant companion to Ilara, a girl with the face of an angel and the hands of a hardened ranch hand. She was known as Ellie at the sprawling Double L Ranch, a simple servant with an easy smile and a knack for making biscuits that could soothe even the most irate cowboy. Her real name was Ilara Beaumont, and her past was a gilded cage she had escaped from, a life of wealth and expectation in Boston that she had traded for dirt, calluses, and a lie. Her father, a ruthless industrialist, had arranged her marriage to a man she despised, a cold, ambitious politician twice her age. Rather than become his property, she had fled west, her only companion, a small, leather-bound book of poetry and a desperate hope for a new life. She found herself at the Double L, owned by a kind but formidable man named Levi Calloway. He was a widower, a man whose face was etched with lines of grief and hard work. He had 2 young children, a boy named Samuel and a girl named Clara, who had lost their mother 2 years prior. Ilara, with her gentle manner and surprising strength, had quickly become an indispensable part of their lives. She wasn't just a servant, she was a stand-in mother, a teacher, a friend. The lie was a fragile shield, and Ilara knew it. She had told Levi she was an orphan from a small town in Pennsylvania, left with nothing after her parents died. He had never questioned her story, too consumed by the daily struggles of ranch life and the responsibility of raising his children. But recently, a new shadow had fallen over the Double L. A neighboring rancher, a powerful and ruthless man named Silas Thorne, was trying to force Levi to sell his land. Thorne was known for his brutal tactics and his long reach, and his presence made Ilara's carefully constructed world feel like it was about to crumble. One blustery afternoon, as Ilara was mending a tear in Samuel's jacket, she overheard Levi speaking to his foreman. "Silas offered me a sum that would make a king blush," Levi said, his voice grim, "but I'll be damned if I sell him my family's legacy. He wants the water rights that run through this land, and he'll stop at nothing to get them." Ilara's heart pounded. She had seen men like Thorne before, men who used their wealth and power to crush others. Her own father was one of them. She felt a familiar knot of fear and helplessness in her stomach. She had run from a life of power games, only to find herself on the periphery of another. That evening, as she tucked Clara into bed, the little girl looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Ellie, will we be safe?" she whispered. "Daddy looks sad." Ilara's hands trembled as she smoothed the hair from Clara's forehead. "Yes, little one," she said, her voice a promise she desperately hoped she could keep. "We will be safe. I'll make sure of it." But as she walked back to her small room, the lie felt heavier than ever. She had built her life on a foundation of sand. How long could she pretend to be someone she wasn't? And what would happen if the truth came out, not just to Levi, but to someone who could use it against him? The next morning, the air was still and heavy, a prelude to a storm. A stagecoach rumbled into town, and with it came the usual weekly mail delivery. The ranch hands were always eager for letters from home, but this week, Ilara felt a chill of dread. She had a feeling that something was coming for her. The mail was sorted, and a thick, official-looking letter was handed to Levi. The return address was from a law firm in Boston. Ilara's blood ran cold. She knew that law firm. It was her father's. Levi opened the letter, his brow furrowed in concentration. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to shock, and then to a cold, hard anger that Ilara had never seen on his face before. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and for the first time in 6 years, she saw the truth reflected in them. The lie was over. "This letter," Levi said, his voice low and tight, "is from the law firm of Beaumont, Hayes and Associates. It says they are looking for Ilara Beaumont, the daughter of Jonathan Beaumont. It mentions that you are a runaway heiress who has been missing for 6 years and that there is a reward for your safe return. It also says that your father is gravely ill and has a change of heart, wanting to find you and reconcile before he dies. Is this true? Ilara's throat tightened. The carefully constructed wall she had built around herself had just crumbled to dust. There was no point in denying it. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My name is Ilara Beaumont." The silence in the room was deafening. The ranch hands who had been gathered there, her friends and protectors for so long, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and betrayal. Their Ellie, the kind, humble servant, was a wealthy heiress. The chasm between them had just widened into a canyon. Levi's face was a mask of disappointment. "You've been living a lie, Ilara. You let me believe you were a simple girl with nowhere to go. You let my children love you, and you let me trust you, all while knowing you had a life of privilege waiting for you. Why?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I ran away from a forced marriage, Levi. My father arranged for me to marry a man I couldn't bear. He was cruel, and he saw me as nothing more than a political asset. I had to escape." Levi's anger softened slightly, replaced by a deep sense of hurt. "You could have told me," he said. "You could have trusted me." "I was afraid," she confessed, "afraid you would send me back, afraid of what my father would do if he found me. I was desperate." The confession hung in the air, a fragile truth in a world of lies. Just then, a rider came thundering up to the ranch. It was Silas Thorne's foreman, his face a sneer of triumph. "Silas Thorne sends his regards," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "He heard you have an heiress living on your property. He's a man who values a good reputation, and he'd be mighty upset if he had to reveal the whereabouts of a missing person to the authorities. He says he'll buy your land for the sum he offered, and he'll forget all about the little secret you're keeping." Ilara's heart sank. Her past had not only caught up to her, it had become a weapon in the hands of the one man who could destroy the life she had come to love. The lie had not only protected her, it had made her a liability, and now she and Levi were bound together in a different kind of fight. The news of Ilara's true identity spread through the Double L like wildfire. The initial shock gave way to a quiet tension. The ranch hands, who had once treated her as one of their own, now kept their distance. The playful banter had vanished, replaced by a guarded silence. Levi was the most affected. He kept his distance, his face a stoic mask. He had always been a man of honor, and the deception cut deep. He had given her a home, and in return, he had been given a lie. That evening, as a thunderstorm brewed on the horizon, Ilara found him sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the darkening sky. She walked over and sat beside him, the floorboards groaning under her weight. "I understand if you want me to leave," she said, her voice quiet. "I have enough money saved to make it to a new town. I wouldn't want to put you and the children at risk because of my past." Levi finally turned to look at her, the rain streaking his face like tears. "It's not that simple, Ilara. Thorne knows. He has a letter from Boston. He won't just let you go. He'll use this to ruin me, to take my land." The shared threat, the one that had just landed on their doorstep, began to knit them back together, a frayed rope under immense strain. "I can help you," she said, her voice firm. "My family's wealth. I know how these people think. They respect power and money. I can find a way to use my resources to fight him." Levi scoffed. "And what? You're going to use your Boston money to buy off a Montana rancher? He's not interested in money, not like that. He wants this land. He wants to own the water rights. This is a game of territory and dominance, not a stock exchange." "But it's about leverage," she insisted. "He thinks he has the upper hand because he has a secret. We can turn that around. What if we use my family's connections to expose his plans? We can hire a law firm, not to send me back, but to defend you, to fight for this land." Levi considered her words, the skepticism slowly giving way to a flicker of hope. He had been fighting this battle alone, relying only on his stubborn pride. Now he had an unexpected ally, an heiress who understood the true nature of the fight. "My father's letter said he was ill, but I don't believe it," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "He's likely just trying to lure me back. But the law firm, they are powerful. They can be a double-edged sword. If we can convince them that I'm not in danger, that I'm safe, and have chosen this life, they may be willing to help. My father would never want his reputation tarnished by a public scandal." The storm finally broke, rain lashing down on the roof. The drops were like the truth, washing away the dirt of the past and revealing the solid ground beneath. They were no longer the simple servant and the noble rancher. They were two people, bound by a lie and united by a shared enemy. The next day, under a sky washed clean by the rain, a new understanding began to form between Levi and Ilara. It wasn't a return to the easy camaraderie they had shared, but a new kind of alliance, one built on a foundation of necessity and a slow-growing respect. They began to work together, poring over old deeds and maps of the ranch. Ilara, with her surprisingly sharp mind for business, saw things Levi had overlooked. "The original deed specifies the water rights are tied to the land, not to the person who owns it," she pointed out, her finger tracing a faint line on the map. "Thorn can't just buy the rights. He has to buy the land." Meanwhile, Levi taught her the subtleties of ranch life, a world she'd only ever observed from the sidelines. He showed her how to read the clouds to predict the weather, how to mend a fence post properly, and how to tell the difference between a sick calf and a healthy one. He saw her not as an heiress, but as a quick and willing student. The children, Clara and Samuel, were the first to truly forgive her. To them, she wasn't Ilara Beaumont. She was still just Ellie, the one who made the best cookies and read them stories at night. Their unconditional affection was a balm for the wounds of broken trust. One afternoon, Samuel found her sitting alone, a look of worry on her face. "Ellie, are you leaving?" he asked, his voice small. Ilara knelt down to his level. "No, Samuel, I'm not leaving. We have to fight to keep this ranch, to keep your home safe." "Will you fight with us?" he asked, his eyes full of hope. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "I will." Her words were overheard by Levi, who had been watching them from a distance. He walked over, his face unreadable. "Thorn sent a man to Boston," he said, his voice grim. "He's trying to get my reputation tarnished with your father's lawyers. He's saying I'm holding you against your will. He's trying to make me look like a kidnapper." A new wave of fear washed over Ilara. Her father's lawyers were ruthless. They would use any means necessary to find her. "We have to write to them," she said, her mind racing. "We have to tell them the truth, that I am here by choice, that I am well, and that you have been nothing but kind to me. And we must also tell them of Thorn's attempt to extort the land from you. We'll present it as a threat to my safety, a public relations nightmare they'll want to avoid." The plan was a risky one, but it was their only option. The alliance was no longer reluctant. It was a matter of survival. They were fighting not just for the ranch, but for their freedom and for the family they had built, however unconventional it was. The letter they drafted was a masterpiece of careful wording. It was a plea for help, but also a subtle warning. Ilara explained that she was living a happy and healthy life on the Double L Ranch, that she had no desire to return to Boston, and that her father's illness was a ruse to lure her back. She also detailed Silas Thorne's attempts to use her as leverage to force Levi Calloway to sell his land, framing it as a threat to her safety and well-being. The letter was sent, and they waited. The days stretched into a week, then two. The tension on the ranch was palpable. The cowboys were on edge, constantly scanning the horizon for signs of Thorne's men. Then, one scorching afternoon, a rider with the emblem of a Boston law firm arrived. He wasn't the grim, serious man they had expected, but a young, surprisingly kind-looking lawyer named Arthur Finch. He was the one who had written the initial letter to Levi. Arthur explained that Jonathan Beaumont was indeed ill, but not gravely. He was simply trying to find his daughter before his death, as he felt some regret over his actions. The political marriage he had arranged had been called off due to a public scandal involving the groom-to-be, and Ilara was no longer in any danger of being forced into it. "Your father wants to see you," Arthur said, his voice gentle. "He doesn't want to force you to return to Boston. He just wants to know you're safe." Ilara felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Her father, the ruthless industrialist, was softening. She didn't believe it. But Arthur's words rang true. He was a man of integrity, and she trusted him. "And what about the man, Thorne?" Levi asked, his voice low and suspicious. Arthur pulled a document from his bag. "We've been keeping an eye on him. My firm has sent a letter to his lawyers, informing them that we are aware of his attempts to extort this ranch, and that any further attempts will be met with a lawsuit for defamation and interference in a legal matter. It also mentions that if any harm comes to Miss Beaumont, my firm will see to it that the full force of the law is brought down on him. Your father may be ill, but he still has a lot of power in this country." The sigh of relief from Levi and Ilara was a shared breath, a sound of hope. The alliance they had forged was paying off. The power of a ruthless patriarch was now their shield. Arthur stayed for a few days, getting to know the ranch and its people. He saw the bond between Ilara and the children, the respect the cowboys had for Levi, and the simple, honest life they led. He saw the truth in Ilara's words. She was not a helpless heiress. She was a part of this family, and she had chosen this life. On the day he left, he handed Ilara a small, leather-bound book. It was her father's journal, filled with his spidery handwriting. "He wanted you to have this," Arthur said. "He wants you to understand." Ilara took the journal, her hands trembling. She didn't know if she would ever read it, but for the first time in 6 years, the heavy weight of her past didn't feel like a burden, but a piece of a story that was still being written. Silas Thorne was not a man who took defeat well. The letter from the Boston lawyers was a blow to his ego, a public humiliation he couldn't stand. He had relied on his reputation for being a ruthless and untouchable man, and now that reputation was being threatened by a woman he had never met. He knew he had to act, and he had to act fast. He sent one of his men to town, a sly, cunning man named Garrett. Garrett was to spread rumors about Ilara and Levi, that Levi was holding her against her will, that Ilara was a con artist who was using her fake identity to take advantage of Levi. The goal was to sow discord and turn the people against them. The plan worked. Whispers and sideways glances followed Ilara and Levi wherever they went. Shopkeepers gave them cold stares, and old friends of Levi's suddenly found themselves too busy to talk. The community they had once been a part of was turning against them. One morning, a fire broke out in the Double L's barn. It was a small fire, easily contained, but it was clear that it had been set deliberately. Levi was furious. "He's not just a man who wants to buy my land," he told Ilara, his voice full of rage. "He's a man who wants to destroy me." Ilara was terrified. The safety she had found on the ranch was gone. The simple, honest life had been replaced by a constant state of fear. "We have to do something," she said. "We can't just wait for him to attack us again." Levi agreed. They decided to set a trap. They would create a ruse that would lure Thorne into a public confrontation, a place where he couldn't rely on brute force and where his true intentions would be exposed. The plan was simple. They would announce that they had received an official letter from a law firm in Boston, stating that the law firm had taken an interest in the Double L Ranch and was considering it as a future site for a major investment. They would say that the lawyers would be visiting the ranch in a week to finalize the deal. The news spread like wildfire. The town, which had been so quick to judge, now looked at Levi and Ilara with a renewed sense of respect. The possibility of a major investment in their small town was a game changer. Silas Thorne, a man who believed every rumor he heard, fell for the bait. He knew that if a Boston firm invested in the Double L, his chances of getting the land would be over. He decided he had to act. He would go to the ranch and force Levi to sell once and for all. The day the Boston lawyers were supposed to arrive was a day of a different kind of tension. The ranch hands were on guard, and Ilara and Levi waited. They had prepared for this moment, but the fear of what was to come was a heavy weight on their hearts. Thorne arrived with 2 of his men, his face a mask of rage. He dismounted his horse and strode toward Levi, his hand resting on the holster of his gun. "I hear you're selling the ranch to some city slickers," he sneered. "I guess you didn't have the guts to stand up to a real man." Levi stood his ground, his face a stoic mask. "The ranch is not for sale, Thorne, and the land is not yours to take." "I'll take it one way or another," Thorne snarled, "and I'll make sure that girl of yours ends up in a Boston asylum. She's crazy, you know. Claiming she's some big city heiress." Ilara stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "My father's law firm has been informed of your threats, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice steady. "They are prepared to take legal action against you for defamation and extortion. They also know of your attempts to use my past as leverage. It seems your plan has backfired." Thorne's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't expected her to be so bold. But he was a man who relied on intimidation, and he wouldn't be defeated by a woman. He reached for his gun. "Drop it, Thorne!" A voice rang out. It was Sheriff Brody, the town's lawman, who had been hiding behind the barn. He had been a friend of Levi's for years, and he had been watching Thorne's movements with suspicion. Thorne was a man who relied on brute force, not on intelligence. He had not considered the possibility that the law would be on Levi and Ilara's side. "You can't prove a thing," Thorne said, his voice a low growl. "We don't have to," Ilara said, a confident smile on her face. "You've just admitted to your motives, and my lawyers are prepared to present your threats to a judge. You've just walked into a trap, Mr. Thorne." Thorne's face turned a shade of purple. He had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, not by a man, but by a woman. He glared at Ilara, then at Levi, and then at the sheriff. With a frustrated sigh, he mounted his horse and rode away, his men following close behind. The confrontation with Thorne was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. The town, now aware of Thorne's true nature, rushed to apologize to Levi and Ilara. The fear and suspicion that had divided them had been replaced by a new kind of respect. Ilara's life had changed forever. She was no longer just Ellie, the servant girl. She was Ilara Beaumont, a woman of strength and conviction who had faced down a ruthless man and won. The quiet, respectful camaraderie between her and Levi had grown into something more. In the weeks after the confrontation, they found themselves drawn to each other, their conversations no longer just about the ranch or the children, but about their lives, their dreams, their hopes. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Levi finally broke the silence. "I was a fool," he said, his voice full of regret. "I let my pride get in the way. I was so angry about your lie that I couldn't see the truth. That you weren't a fake. You were just a woman who was trying to survive." Ilara's hand reached for his, her fingers intertwining with his. "And I was a fool for not trusting you," she said. "I should have told you from the beginning, but I was so afraid of losing the life I had found here." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a tenderness she had never seen before. "You never lost it, Ilara. You found it, and I found you, and I want to keep both of you." Her heart soared. She had run away from a life of forced marriage, and she had found love in the most unexpected of places. Ilara knew she had to face her past, not as a victim, but as a woman who had found her own way. She opened the journal her father had given her, and she began to read. The pages were filled with her father's thoughts, not just about business and politics, but about his own regrets, his own fears. He had arranged her marriage not out of cruelty, but out of a misguided belief that he was protecting her, ensuring her a life of comfort and security. He confessed that he had never loved the man he had forced her to marry, and he was filled with regret. His illness was indeed a ruse to find her, but he was also genuinely afraid of dying before he could make amends. He wrote of his admiration for her courage, for her strength, and for her determination to live life on her own terms. Ilara felt a wave of conflicting emotions. The years of anger and resentment began to dissolve, replaced by a complex understanding. She had run away from a man she thought was a monster, only to find that he was just a man, flawed and afraid. She wrote a letter back to her father, not of forgiveness but of acknowledgement. She told him that she was happy, that she had found a family, and that she had found a home. She didn't offer to return, but she offered a new kind of connection, a connection built on truth and honesty. That evening, as she sat with Levi on the porch, a peaceful silence between them, she told him everything. She told him about her father, about the journal, and about the letter she had written. Levi listened, his hand holding hers. When she was done, he said, "You've been so strong, Ilara. You've fought for your freedom, and you've fought for this ranch, and you've done it all on your own terms. I'm so proud of you." Ilara leaned her head against his shoulder. The fear of the past was gone, replaced by the promise of the future. The lie had been a shield, but the truth was a foundation. And on that foundation, a new life, a new family, and a new love were beginning to grow. Months later, a letter arrived from Boston. It was from her father. He wrote that he was proud of her, that he respected her decision, and that he would no longer seek to force her to return. He also enclosed a deed, a generous gift of a plot of land that bordered the Double L Ranch. It was a gesture of reconciliation, a silent apology. The Double L Ranch was safe, and the family that had been built on a foundation of lies was now stronger than ever, built on a foundation of truth and love. The ranch hands had accepted Ilara not as an heiress, but as a member of the family. The children, Clara and Samuel, had their Ellie back, and now they had a father and a mother who were bound by a love that was forged in the fire of conflict and the quiet peace of understanding. Ilara and Levi were married on a warm, sunny day, with the children as their witnesses and the vast, beautiful expanse of the Montana plains as their cathedral. It was a simple ceremony with no frills or fanfare, just the two of them and the promise of a lifetime together. The lie she had carried for 6 years had been a heavy burden, but it had also been her salvation. It had led her to a place where she had found not just freedom, but a family, a home, and a love that was more precious than any wealth. She had run from a life she had been born into, only to find the life she had been meant to live all along.